So what ended up happening was I stole it. Of course, I
Ooh.
called it borrowing,
Uh-huh.
but I stole the money from a client who had no idea that was taking place. And I paid the banker, and he was happy, and we walked away as chicken eating buddies, as you might say in the Southeast United States. But long story short, I paid it back. I did it again. I paid it back, and then it became a Ponzi scheme.
Ooh.
So I created a Ponzi, not proud of that, by the way, but I created a Ponzi scheme that lasted for a little over 3 years. And then, of course, as they all will, it collapsed. I lost everything, including my license as a CPA, partnership interest, the whole ball of wax. And eventually, on October 2nd, 1995, um, marched my happy butt into federal prison and became 11-642-058, or an inmate.
Many people want to be leaders. Fewer understand what it really means to lead people well. So what separates the two? Welcome to the Lead with Purpose podcast with your host, Merv Jersek. Each week, you'll hear honest conversations with leaders who have been in the trenches and have stories to tell. They'll share their practical wisdom to help cut through the noise and get to the heart of leadership. So let's get started.
Hey, welcome listeners to Lead with Purpose podcast. I just got to tell you that every public speaking coach I have had has always given me the same advice. You begin every presentation with an attention-getting opening. Well, my guest today is Chuck Gallagher. I've known Chuck for some time now. He and I were, I think, on the chapter leadership committee for the National Speakers Association. But Chuck did exactly what my speaking coaches always told me. I was at a presentation that he was giving, and he came onto the stage in an orange jumpsuit, and I believe, if I remember correctly, he had handcuffs on as well, and talk about attention getting. So Chuck, welcome to Lead with
Well,
Purpose. And if you could just spend a few minutes sharing that story and then we'll get into the interview.
okay, Merv. So first thing, let me say thank you for allowing me to be on. And it was someone in the speaking community years ago that said, when you step on stage, you got to do something that's memorable, because unless you're Tony Robbins or Zig Ziglar or whatever, they're not going to remember you. And I said, I don't, what would that be? And she looked at me and she said, oh, yours is easy. Now, what your listeners don't know is I'm a convicted felon. Back in the 80s, I was tax partner in a CPA firm. I testified before Congress, written articles in national magazines, had a great career, except I had too much debt.
Ooh.
And in a moment of weakness, I'll never forget the call when the banker called and said, you're 2 months behind in your house payment. Is there a problem? It was one of those moments where I was 2 months behind in my house payment, but I did not want to tell the banker that, because he sent me lots of business. And it was like, well, if I can't pay my bills, how can I help other people with their financial affairs? So the moment of weakness hit. It was not frontal cortex response. It was lizard brain. And I said, you know, I'm sure that payment's been misapplied. Check your records. And in 1987, by the way, I could get away with that. Okay. So while he was gone checking the records, I was figuring out, how am I going to come up with $2,000? I mean, I needed to come up with money really quick to solve this problem. So what ended up happening was I stole it. Of course, I
Ooh.
called it borrowing.
Uh-huh.
I stole the money from a client who had no idea that was taking place. And I paid the banker, and he was happy, and we walked away as chicken eating buddies, as you might say in the Southeast United States. But long story short, I paid it back. I did it again. I paid it back, and then it became a Ponzi scheme.
Ooh.
So I created a Ponzi, not proud of that, by the way, but I created a Ponzi scheme that lasted for a little over 3 years. And then, of course, as they all will, it collapsed. I lost everything, including my license as a CPA, partnership interest, the whole ball of wax. And eventually, on October 2nd, 1995, marched my happy butt into federal prison and became 11-642-058, or an inmate.
Oh, wow.
So that said, going back to the opening, then some, 10 to 12 years later, when I'm starting to speak, the lady said, you need to walk out in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. And I'm like, that's crazy. She said, people won't forget it.
I didn't. I didn't.
So, yeah, I've used that ever since, which,
Yeah.
it's kind of funny going through airport security whenever you have 3 sets of handcuffs in your carry-on bags, and TSA's looking at you like, I bet he's Homeland Security or FBI or something, and I'm like, "Only in my dreams, only in
Yeah,
my dreams."
yeah. So I was right. I did remember the handcuffs then.
Oh, yes, the
Yeah,
handcuffs,
okay.
yeah, go with it. Now, I carry a key to the handcuffs in a couple
Yeah.
of places just in case, you gotta be careful with that.
Well, here's where I'd like to start because I do these leadership podcasts and I bring on experts, people who don't speak from theory, who don't speak from textbooks, but people who have lived experience. And I think my first question to you, kind of starting this whole thing, is how did losing everything reshape your understanding of leadership?
Well, the first thing I will say is it shaped it because, um, if you're going to create a positive outcome, you have to accept responsibility, have to
Uh-huh.
accept accountability. So it's easy for someone to play the victim role. Oh, something happened and it was because of this. And if it weren't for that, and whatever the excuses are that we all will hear in different places. But ultimately, every one of us is accountable for what takes place in our life. Now, that doesn't mean we control everything that takes place. We can't control what Mother Nature might bring.
Yeah.
We can, however, control how we respond to it. So when we understand that we're accountable and have responsibility, at that point, then we can step into the possibility of being an effective leader. But until you do that, you're going to be floundering.
Well, and along that path, the one that you took, one that you lived, that experience, in general, perhaps, what are some of the lies that leaders tell themselves commonly right before maybe they make a bad ethical decision?
Um, oh my gosh, it's almost like there's so many, but it becomes simple. Everybody does it. This is just the way we do things. I was Merv, it was really interesting. I was at a major hotel chain doing a presentation. It was mostly to the accounting and finance department. And I asked this question. I was the oldest person in the room. It was kind of funny watching all these kids. I call them kids,
Kids,
folks in
yeah,
their 30s or so.
yeah.
But I asked the question. I said, "How many of you have had an assignment, turned it into senior management, and senior management looks at it, doesn't like the numbers, and says, 'Look, you're going to have to sharpen your pencil because we can't do this.'"
Mm.
And probably 85% of the people raise their hands. And it's one of those things where so many times people get caught up in the we do whatever we need to do to get the outcome we're looking for that it becomes commonplace. It's just socially acceptable.
Mm. Yeah. You also talked about, I was just trying to recall the way you answered my first question. You talked about accountability from a leadership perspective.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, ethics, I think, also is about accountability. It's about choices. It's about consequences, facing those.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
why do smart, successful people, and I've seen this myself, why do they make such incredibly foolish decisions?
Well, okay. So I'm not a neuroscientist. So let me just start with this. Okay.
Neither am I, but I play one on podcasts.
There we go. That's great. But reality is if everything in life is going well, I mean, if your finances are in order, you're not concerned about where the next paycheck's coming from. If your relationships are good, I come home, my wife's going to greet me and give me a hug. My two little Cavalier King Charles Spaniels are going to come up. It's like the first time they've ever seen me. Dogs are great.
Yep.
If my health is good, if life is good, we tend to think with our frontal cortex and we'll make generally good decisions. But when there is
Oh,
pressure may be, oh, there's a relationship problem. Oh, there's a financial issue. Oh my gosh, we're not going to hit the numbers we need.
yep.
Oh, the financial statements aren't going to support the bank continuing the line of credit that we have. Uh, oh, my health I just found out I have cancer. What am I going to do? How is this going to work? When pressure hits a human being and we don't know which of those trigger buttons are going to hit. But when it does, we can't help but go to lizard brain. And lizard brain means we're going to do the quickest thing that comes to mind to solve the problem in a way that appears to give us the chance to breathe.
Yeah.
And that means that in many cases, really smart people will do some of the stupidest things and then try to rationalize it later.
After, yeah. Do you think ambition and ego kind of play into that as
Oh,
well?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Ambition, ego, um, any of the things that are trigger points in human behavior that drive you. In my case, just to be candid, I created the Ponzi scheme, and people ask me after the fact, "What did you use the money for? Was it drugs? Was it women?" No, it was lifestyle,
Huh?
because I played the better my lifestyle, the more people looked at me, and therefore the more people wanted to use the service I offered because look how successful he
Uh,
was.
of course.
Well,
Yeah.
the reality was I was successful because I was stealing money from people to create an illusion of success, which was all fine until it collapsed. And then
And
when it collapsed, the friends started running away like scalded dogs. I mean, it was
yeah.
like they wanted nothing to do with me.
Yeah, and a lot of my listeners are young, emerging leaders, people who are coming into those leadership offices, and a lot of them are thinking, "Well, I would never do that," and I'm thinking that maybe their overconfidence could be dangerous.
Well,
Yes,
yeah, and I just give you one simple, really quick example. I will
sure.
ask people, I said, how many of you would do something unethical? Most people will not raise their hands. Okay. How
Okay.
many of you thinking voluntarily just breaking the law, robbing a convenience store, whatever? How many of you think voluntarily breaking the law is unethical? Most people raise their hands. Okay. Good. How many of you have driven on the interstate highways in the past 2 weeks? Everybody raises their hand, and they just keep them up because they know the next question. And how
Yeah.
many of you speed? And it's everybody. Well, here's the thing. Speeding, I mean, you can get a ticket for that. And if you do, you're either going to hire a lawyer, which means you're spending money to get
Yep.
out of it,
Yep.
or you're going to pay your insurance company a whole lot more money for the next several years because you have points on your license. But the reality is, if it's socially acceptable, if it seems like it's okay, if everybody just kind of does it, if that's the norm, then it's easy to just completely ignore the potential consequence that could come from it. And I,
Yeah.
I will jokingly say, so a lot of people use Waze on their phone or in their car, Apple
Yep.
CarPlay, Waze. You know where you're going. So
Yep.
I asked them, why do you have Waze? And they said, because it says police reported ahead. Aha. So you're speeding and breaking the law. But when it says police reported ahead, you slow down. You look all around for the police.
Yeah.
And then when you don't see them, then you pick back the speed back up. So you're doing something wrong. You just choose to ignore it.
Yeah, exactly. You just reminded me, my wife and I just came back from a 3,400-mile road trip. We
Oh,
we
wow.
decided to take a nice little road trip up to our family farm in Canada and back. And I didn't use Waze, but I set the speedometer just a little over. And every once in a while, when I'd be coming into a small town America, I'm thinking, there might be a speed trap. I'd slow down, and sure enough, I bet we saw 5, 6, 7 speed traps.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah,
No.
but I was sneaking in.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
just a little. But, I think you just answered a question that I had kinda stirring in my mind, and that is, how can leaders truly unintentionally reward unethical behavior without even realizing it? And you may have just answered it with, "Well, everybody's doing it, right?"
Right. And one of the things, it's hard. I will say this, especially today. In the economic climate, in the political climate, it's really hard today to really choose to make ethical choices
Mm,
because it is so easy. And there are so many examples of it doesn't make any difference. I mean, just to be honest, you should pay your taxes. You should file the tax return correctly. But with half the IRS laid off and, the political climate being what it is, what's the point? Because it just appears that the chance of ever getting caught is so freaking slim.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
that doesn't make it right, but it sure makes it easy to choose to do something if your perception is, I won't get caught.
Yeah. Doesn't make it right, but it makes it tempting.
Oh, it sure does.
Yeah. So if I get into sort of the minds of my young leaders
Sure.
and those who want to create a culture, um, part of what I remember from when I was in corporate was that people sometimes didn't want to speak up. And how do you think young leaders can create that culture where people do speak up instead of staying quiet when they see something going on that should not be going on?
Well, first thing, to be candid, it's hard. I
Yeah.
don't want to, leave the impression that, oh, that's an easy thing to do, but there is strength in numbers. And so one of the challenges becomes if I'm a single individual whistleblower, that's challenging. There could be a consequence that I face. Didn't
Mhm.
say that you shouldn't do that, but the consequences are real. But if people get together and say collectively, this is a problem, it becomes much more difficult to ignore the problem if there are 10 people saying it or 100 people saying it than if there's one person saying it.
Right. That's
And
yeah.
one other thing, Murder. I mean, this is a little bit weird, but I do want to share this, especially for the younger execs. I had a guy the other day call me. When I say the other day, it was probably 3 months ago. But he called me and he said, "I was searching success following prison, and you popped up." By the way, that was never a search term that I anticipated. Okay, but anyway,
Your
and he said,
SEO is climbing.
"Yeah, my SEO is climbing, not where I wanted it to be, but nonetheless." Um, I said to him, I said, "Well, what's the problem?" He said, "Well, I just finished my sentence. I'm a convicted felon." And I said, "What for?" And he said, "I was the CFO of a company, and I thought the CEO and the COO were doing something wrong, hanky panky. So I decided I would quit. I was not going to be a part of this company." Okay.
Hmm.
Next CFO comes in, did the same thing. Third CFO comes in, and he decides he wants a piece of the action. So now it's the CFO, the COO, and the CEO all doing something wrong. And by the way, they all ended up in federal prison. Okay. What does this have to do with anything on this podcast? Well, the first CFO that quit because he said, I don't want any part of it,
Yeah.
had the U.S. attorney come and said, "Can you tell me why did you quit your job?" "Well, I quit because I thought the CEO and the COO were doing something wrong and I didn't want any part of it." "Oh, so you knew about it, but you
Oh,
didn't say anything."
wow.
That's conspiracy.
Wow.
So you have two choices. The full weight of the federal government is we're going to charge you with conspiracy and you can fight it and we'll win. Or you can take an ankle bracelet and serve time at home for a year, but you'll be a convicted felon. So of course he lost his license as a CPA. So sometimes even in the face of, gosh, this is hard, saying something is what will ultimately preserve your career because if you know something is wrong and you don't report it from a federal perspective, that is conspiracy to do something wrong,
Yeah.
which is a federal crime and can put you in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs.
And it doesn't even have to be that dramatic. It can be something smaller, but still,
Absolutely.
yeah. And when you're dealing with teams, especially, you want to make sure that those team members are dealt with properly and ethically and with integrity, and that there is good compliance.
Yeah.
Mm. Actually, that's a good question. Is there a difference between compliance and integrity?
Well, compliance by nature is following the written rules of what the government says is the law of the land and what you're supposed to do. Um, here's a perfect example of compliance and integrity. There is a law basically that is like in the federal government, you're not supposed to go bribe people, right?
Yeah.
There's a law that says you're not supposed to go bribing people for business. Okay, fine. So you know that law exists. Now, I don't mean this politically, so let me just first say that, just in case anybody's listening. But the Trump administration basically said that's a stupid law. I mean, the people in China and the people in India are bribing people all the time, so they have a competitive advantage we don't. We're not going to worry about the law, okay? So that presumes that in that administration, you really don't have to worry about it because we're not going to look at it. We don't care. But you have the same competitive advantage somebody from China does. Well, that's all fine and good until there's a new administration because the law never changed.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden there's a new administration and they say, wait a minute, no, 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 the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act still exists and you were bribing people and we're going to look back during the statute of limitations we've got and we're going to prosecute you. So integrity says, I am going to do what's right. I will follow the law, even though I'm told we're not going to enforce the law.
Yeah.
Because the consequence isn't dictated by the current administration, it's dictated by what does the law say. Whether it's enforced or not are different issues.
Yeah. And I can see that I can see that being problematic for an organization, and I can see that kind of thinking being problematic for an individual filing an expense report. I mean,
Absolutely.
just because someone's not going to check doesn't mean I shouldn't throw in this. It's yeah,
Absolutely.
integrity above all. Yes, I agree with that. So
Yep.
um, now I want to get back to your story a little bit because you've obviously rebuilt that trust after that Ponzi scheme, that ethical failure. How
Sure.
did you do that? How did you rebuild your trust?
Well, two ways. Number one, when I got out of federal prison, I obviously was not going to be a CPA again or work in financial services with money. So I got the only job that someone was willing to give me, which was selling cemetery property door to door. Mom always said death and taxes. I screwed up taxes, so I figured I'd try death.
Yeah.
But I recognize one thing, and I think it's really true in a lot of areas. I really needed to be good at what I did
Yeah.
because I was expendable. If they were going to have a reduction in force, get rid of the convict. I mean, that's easy. That's just low hanging fruit. But if I was their number one salesperson, it was a little more difficult to do. So I have taken the attitude that number one, I need to be transparent. So from job one through today, and I'm a vice president in a public company today, I have always said, I'm a convicted felon. This is what happened. I'm going to tell you the truth on the front end. I am not going to wait to go in and do a job interview and never tell Merv what's going on and
Mhm.
have him do a background check and then it come back and him say, well, Chuck, I'm not sure we can hire you because you're a convicted felon. I'm going to tell you that within the first 5 minutes of the interview. Because if that's a problem, one, I don't need to waste your time.
Right.
But two, I have your ear. So if by chance you're willing to give me that second chance, that means I have established trust with you because I haven't waited for you to find it. I'm going to out myself.
Sure.
And I have been a vice president in two public companies, founded one company that was sold to a public company. And I have always done that because if I lay it out on the front end, that truth at the beginning establishes the foundation for trust.
And so there's reconciliation and there's the ability to come back, and you've shown that from what most of my listeners will never ever experience. So I commend you for that, and I commend your transparency as well.
Well, let's be honest with each other, and this is a truth of human nature. If I'm not transparent, someone
Yeah.
will find it out,
Yep.
and then they will try to use it against me.
Exactly.
Years ago, I was a senior VP in a public company. I had just moved from the Carolinas to Texas, and my boss said, "When you go to Texas, you don't have to tell them all about your past. You've earned the right just to do your job." And I said, "I need to tell them, no, don't do it. I'm telling you, don't do it." Okay. Within 3 months, one of the people that worked for me came in and sat down and said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Have you ever been to jail?" "Yes, I have." "Why?" And I told the young lady, and then I said, "Now, I've been honest with you. Tell me, why are you asking me that question?" She said, "Well, somebody from North Carolina said, you can't trust that guy. He's been to jail."
Oh wow.
And it was like, it proved the point. If there's something out there that somebody can use against you, they will.
Yeah.
So you're better off exposing it yourself and controlling the narrative than you are letting somebody find it out. And then all of a sudden they have the power to control whatever that narrative is.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Um, and what do you think are some ethical traps right now for younger professionals? Well, and especially in today's culture and today's business, or even today's volunteer organization society. What do you think are some of those ethical traps that they can easily fall into?
Well, the thing that tends to come up most often are the small things that happen that take place that no one thinks about.
Mm,
Um, it's kind of funny. I was actually speaking to a fairly large organization, and we were talking about socially acceptable. And one of the persons in the room said, "Well, we lock our supply cabinet up in August and September." And I thought, 2 months. Why? Now, obviously, color my hair or lack thereof. I haven't had young kids in a long time, and they think it's back to school. Because what will happen is people forget to go to Staples to buy the back to school supplies. They'll just go to the supply cabinet, take it with the intent of putting it back. But when they locked the cabinet, the supply loss went down by over 21%.
oh man.
The rest of the year, not much. But August and September was the theft time. People did not walk around thinking I'm a thief. They're thinking I'm just going to do what's convenient in the moment. And that becomes the challenge for people. Mostly it's going to be fudging expense reports. It's
Yeah.
going to be approving something that probably shouldn't be approved, or not reporting something that probably should be reported, or at least saying something. Um, it's the person who is doing something wrong and just ignoring it because I don't want to get involved. Well, I get it.
Yeah.
There's an element of it's not comfortable to get involved, but to the organization, if you don't, what ends up happening? Because too often complacency becomes complicity.
Oh, good point. Yeah. So the other thing is now, I know you're still out there talking to organizations and talking about your experience and ethics and integrity. And what are you finding now with artificial intelligence? Are you finding that is also a opportunity for less than ethical behavior?
Yeah, but Merv, here's the thing. That's fun because I do this a lot.
Uh-huh.
The challenge with AI is it's a tool.
Yeah.
And And the issue becomes some people think, oh, this is the Antichrist. This is terrible. They're using artificial intelligence, blah, 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 blah. There's nothing wrong with using the tool. Are you using the tool in a way that is going to create a positive outcome for the organization? And in many cases, the biggest challenge, especially with smaller organizations, this is true with nonprofits and small to medium sized businesses, is everybody now has access to it. We've got access to Claude, or access to Chat GPT, or access to Gemini, or whatever it
Mm.
happens to be, all of the large language models, which are really cool in the things they
Yeah.
do. But the organization doesn't have an overarching policy about what should be done. So the challenge that I'm seeing today is anybody in the organization can go into Chat GPT and try to create this or do that or whatever the workflow problem happens to be. But if there's no overarching policy at the organizational level, if Chuck goes out and uses a large language model and it has a hallucination and does something wrong, I mean, it ain't right. It's
Yeah.
just made up crap, and that gets out, and then all of a sudden somebody calls me on the carpet because of it, they will end up suing the organization. And I'm an employee of the organization, so they sue the organization because I ain't got anything, but the organization most certainly does. And the
Uh-huh.
first thing that's going to happen is they're going to say, well, what is your AI overarching policy for utilization? And they'll say, we don't have one, which
Mhm.
means you may as well get ready to write a big check.
Yeah.
So the challenge today is to get organizations to recognize, don't be afraid of AI, but understand the scope under which AI can be used, and that employees understand what those rules are. So if they go off the deep end and do something that falls outside the policy, they broke policy, but the organizations protected themselves because they're is a policy.
Yeah. I think right after this podcast, I'm gonna go to Claude and ask it to write me a policy for how to use AI.
And I will say, I use AI all the time, and
I
it
do too.
is amazing
Yeah.
the additional productivity. Um, and I don't know how much time we have, but I had a lady, it was in a class that I was talking with, and she was all upset because she was an instructor in school, and she had nursing students, and she wanted them to write a 5,000 word paper on HIPAA. And now they're using Chat GPT, and it's just not right. And she was all wound up. And in the conversation, it was like, look, what do you want them to learn from writing the 5,000 word paper? Well, I want them to learn about HIPAA. I said,
Mhm.
good. Have them write the paper, put it in a box, let them leave class, put it in your SUV, take it to the recycle bin, dump them. And she looked at me like I had two heads. And I said, now the next time in class, have one piece of paper numbered 1 to 5 with their name on it. And then ask them, what did you learn from writing your paper? Because if they used AI and didn't read it or
Mhm.
understand it or
Mhm.
learn anything, they failed the course.
Yeah.
But if they learn something from it, and I promise you, I think you'd probably say the same, but I look at stuff that comes from AI and it's like, wow, I've learned things that I never would have even thought to ask the question about.
Yeah.
So I'm a smarter guy in my 60s than I was in my 50s because it's opening doors and in ways that I never would have considered. So I can learn from it, but I need to understand in using it, it's a tool to help me expand the abilities.
Yeah, so there's nothing unethical about using it to I mean, I remember, and you may remember this, when we weren't allowed to use calculators in
Oh
math
yeah.
class, right?
Oh
So,
yeah.
I mean, you're right, it is a tool, but there are ethical ways of using it, and then there are less than integrous ways of using it when it comes to some corporate things. So I
Certainly.
appreciate that. That was a great response to that because I'm sure there's a lot of my listeners who are faced with that almost every day at their jobs. So that's great. Hey,
Well,
we
it's a
go ahead.
fun world to be in, and you and I sitting here in 2026, the question will be in 2030, what will things look like? Because at the speed it's changing,
Yeah,
it's going to be a heck of a ride.
it will. Absolutely. At some point, I may sit back and watch my grandchildren see how they deal with it. So.
Oh yes.
Hey, you mentioned earlier, yeah, we are running out of time here on this podcast, but I do like to finish these with some rapid fire question and answer. I asked the
Ooh,
question,
okay.
just kind of get a little more chuck in here. And how about this one? What's the hardest ethical pressure that leaders face today?
The hardest ethical pressure they face is being willing to stand up for the right thing in the face of social pressure not to.
Ah, yes, and possibly consequences that may follow, right?
Absolutely.
If if I'm a young leader, emerging executive perhaps, listening to you and I today, what's one habit that you would encourage them to practice daily?
I think one of the things on a daily basis is take small snippets, just small pieces of a book or a quote or whatever it happens to be, but every day have just some time to think about one simple thing that is important for a leader. I'm not a reader where I'm going to sit down for hours and hours and hours with a book. But if I'm listening to a book and I get 15 minutes a day, it grounds me in remembering the things that I need to be thinking about.
No, that's great. Yeah. Here's a finish this sentence for me. Character is revealed most clearly when.
We are truly under pressure.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. And then let me ask you one more. What is the best piece of leadership advice that Chuck Gallagher has ever received?
Ooh, wow. Well, there's
No,
actually
that's a tough
two of
one.
them. One is
Yeah.
the truest test of leadership is the ability to recognize a problem before the problem becomes an emergency. And the other is be careful who you tick off because you may end up working for him one day.
That's good. Well, hey, Chuck, I just want to thank you. But first of all, for your honesty and your vulnerability, and for helping my leadership listeners connect the dots between behavior and choices and consequences and ultimately their purpose. So let me ask you, where can our audience find you to learn more about, say, your keynote speaking or your consulting or your training?
Well, the easy thing is just go to the website, chuckgallagher.com. I didn't try to make it too hard. It's a name, and most people can figure out how to spell Gallagher. You get close enough, Google's going to make that happen easy for you. Or otherwise, we can certainly connect on LinkedIn. Same thing. Just look up Chuck Gallagher. There aren't many of us.
Right.
Um, so,
Well, one of my favorite comedians was Gallagher.
oh my gosh. I loved Gallagher. I got to see him live in concert one time with the plastic that you pulled up and so forth. It was a blast.
Did you get the watermelon spray?
Well, okay, now you've opened the door. We
Yeah,
were
I did.
20
I did.
we were 22 rows back and got nothing. Nothing. My
Um,
wife was sitting beside me, got nothing. And so finally I told her, I said, quit pulling that thing up. Nothing's coming back this far. And he had 2 pies of cottage cheese, and he took Sledge-O-Matic and smashed the crap out of it. And the audience erupted, and I looked over, and on my wife's left boob was cottage cheese. And you've been Gallagher. This was great.
oh man, I wish I'd have seen him. Yeah, he's fun.
That was great.
Anyway, one thing that I really appreciate about our conversation today is that you reminded me, is that ethics isn't some dusty corporate policy sitting in a binder somewhere like so many corporations
Oh, yeah.
like to do. So, but it's a daily thing, and it's leadership, I think, in real time. So,
It
for
is.
those of you who are listening to me today, this conversation is such an important reminder that success without any kind of integrity is so fragile. Titles can disappear. Chuck showed us that earlier. Money can disappear. Reputations can be tarnished. But real character is built decision by decision, choice by choice, every single day. And we'll see you next time as we continue to lead with purpose.
If today's conversation added value, make sure you subscribe. And if this episode resonated, please leave a quick review to help other leaders discover the show. And remember, leadership works best when you put people first. Let's lead with purpose, together.